Which of these diets do you think is better for weight loss? A low-fat vegan diet or the Mediterranean diet? This study, published in the Journal of American Nutrition Association, attempted to answer this question. Here's what happened. After 16 weeks on a low-fat vegan diet, the 52 participants who completed the study lost an average of 13 pounds. But after 16 weeks on the Mediterranean diet, they didn't see any weight change overall. So, does this mean the vegan diet was the clear winner? The headlines certainly suggest that to be the case. But as a curious human, much like you, I wanted to dig a little deeper because the details are important. And in a few minutes, I'll point out a glaring issue in this study's numbers. First, I want to point out that this study was conducted and funded by the Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine, which is a nonprofit organization that heavily promotes a vegan diet. In fact, the organization's president, Dr. Neal Barnard, writes popular weight loss books that highlight a vegan diet. Now, this kind of thing happens all the time in scientific research, and it's important to be aware of it because it can lead to bias, whether intentional or unintentional. So keep that in the back of your mind. Now, this study is what's known as a randomized crossover trial, where 62 overweight adults were split into two groups. For the first 16 weeks, half of them were randomly given a low-fat vegan diet, and the other half were given a Mediterranean diet. After those first 16 weeks, all the study participants returned to their normal baseline diet for 4 weeks, and then they crossed over to the other diet for the final 16 weeks. Now this is interesting. The participants weren't asked to restrict their calories at all. Instead, they were asked to restrict the types of foods they ate. While on the low-fat vegan diet, they were instructed to eat only vegetables, grains, legumes, and fruits, while avoiding any added fats, plus they supplemented with B12. And while on the Mediterranean diet, they could eat all of those foods, plus fish and shellfish, lean white meat, nuts, seeds, and extra virgin olive oil, and here's the kicker. They were also told they could eat as much whole grain cereals, eggs, low-fat cheese, and chocolate with at least 50% cacao as they desired. Again, the results. The vegan diet showed an average of 13 pounds lost over a 16-week period, while the Mediterranean diet didn't show weight gain or loss overall. So the fact that people lost weight while on this low-fat vegan diet isn't really surprising here, because anytime you restrict the types of food someone is eating, they usually end up eating less calories overall, which of course leads to weight loss. In fact, while on the vegan diet, people reported eating 500 fewer calories per day than those on the Mediterranean diet. That's a huge difference. The vegan eaters were also told to stay away from added fats. And that's important because a gram of fat has more than double the calories than a gram of protein or carbs. While on the Mediterranean diet, people were encouraged to consume 50 grams of extra virgin olive oil every day, or about 3.5 tablespoons, which on its own accounts for about 400 daily calories. So, while the Mediterranean group was gladly indulging in olive oil, eggs, cheese, and chocolate, the vegan group wasn't getting very much fat at all. Therefore, they consumed fewer calories, and they lost weight. But the big question for me here is, how do study designs like this play out in real life? In other words, is this low-fat vegan diet as designed in this study actually healthy and sustainable for you? We all know there are a lot of health benefits to eating more fruits, vegetables, and fiber, and that certainly happened here. So in that sense, yes, this vegan diet has merit. But remember that while on the vegan diet, the participants lost a little over 13 pounds. 42% of that was actually lean body mass, which includes muscle. Now, when people are losing weight, they're going to lose some lean mass along with fat loss. But the best way to mitigate against muscle loss while dieting is to make sure you eat enough protein and do some resistance training. Here's where I ran into a glaring issue with this study. While on the low-fat vegan diet, these people only ate about 39 grams of protein per day on average. And when you consider their average weight was 201 pounds by the end of the vegan portion of the study, this was not nearly enough protein to be considered healthy. In fact, the recommended dietary allowance for daily protein for someone weighing 201 pounds is about 72 grams. And that's the minimum amount to keep from getting sick. It's not necessarily an optimal amount, especially for someone who exercises. These people are only eating 39 grams of protein, which is barely over half the minimum to avoid getting sick. What's interesting is I didn't find this highlighted anywhere in the study results at all, or in an interview I watched about this study with the lead researcher. I had to dig into the supplemental spreadsheets to find these numbers. This is one of the frustrating things to me about nutrition science. It's so easy for researchers to highlight the results that work in their favor, like the fact that people lost weight on the low-fat vegan diet, while basically disregarding the fact that this diet, as practiced in this study, simply wasn't sustainable. Now, of course, people eating a low-fat vegan diet can get plenty of protein, but they have to make a conscious effort to do so. And even if people did follow this particular diet while getting enough protein, would this way of eating be sustainable for most people? Remember that it excluded nuts and seeds along with added fats and oils. That knocks out most vegan options at supermarkets or restaurants right off the bat, so it'd be pretty hard for most people to follow long term. Okay, let's wrap things up. Here are the 3 biggest takeaways for you. Number 1. Small, short-term nutrition studies aren't very conclusive on their own, especially when they're as biased as this one. So take them and their sensational media headlines with a grain of salt, pun intended. Number 2, it's never a great idea to base your entire diet on a single study like this. And if you're going to lean on studies as a main source for deciding how to eat, there are much larger, longer-term, legitimate studies out there. That said, it's still important to know that you can't always take studies at face value. You may need to dig a little deeper. And finally, number 3, there is no perfect diet for weight loss. People lose weight on all sorts of diets and eating patterns. You lose weight when you expend more calories than you take in. Again, I'm not here to preach for or against the vegan or Mediterranean diets, but I will say this. When you're deciding on a certain way of eating, it's important to think long term. Is this going to benefit your health over time? Is it going to be enjoyable? What are the drawbacks? Because every diet has them. And is this way of eating going to be sustainable for you in the context of your busy, everyday life for the long term? If you enjoyed this video, subscribe for more. And if you'd like my free 7-day nutrition course for busy people, go to harvestnutrition.com.